Sometimes a kitchen may have sustained some damage that we will need to repair before we can refinish it. This may come in the form of scratches, nail holes, or a dent where someone bumped into it. Here we can see that this piece has a lot of damage, both deep and shallow. The first thing we need to do is sand it so that any raised edges are taken off and the surface is smooth and flush. You can either sand by hand or with the machine using rough sandpaper. We need to wipe all the dust off before we do any filling. To fill the holes, we use this spackling paste from Sherwin-Williams. Use 2 putty knives when spreading spackling, one to hold the paste and another smaller one to spread it. Good spackling should be smooth and consistent, easy to spread with no lumps. Get a small amount of the paste on the edge of your spreading knife and drag it over the area like this. We want to make sure the paste is pushed all the way into the deeper holes. Holes this deep will need multiple coats of spackling, so for the first coat we don't want it too thick. A thick coat like this will take many times longer to dry, as the moisture trapped deep in the holes will have to work its way out through a lot of material. For the first coat, it's better to scrape some off and leave it looking thin like this. When you put your excess spackling back in its tub, don't scrape it off the edge like this, as it'll dry out quicker and the dried bits will fall into the tub, ruining the rest of the paste. Rather, keep the edges clean and plop the paste right into the middle. An hour or two later, the spackling has dried, so we can sand it off. It's better to sand it off by hand rather than using the machine, as you have a lot more control. Since this is just the first coat of filler, I do a quick rough sand, getting all the material off the surface of the cabinet. Once again, I wipe away all the dust. I can feel that the surface still isn't completely smooth. Spackling shrinks as it dries, so even though it was full completely before, you can see that pockets have opened up and it is no longer flush with the surface. This is why a second coat is needed. Since this is the final coat, I am being much more careful to ensure the filler goes on smoothly and evenly. Again, I don't want it to be too thick, only about 1 millimeter or less, but I also want to make sure there are no spots directly above the holes that don't have an even covering, or else I would have to do an unnecessary third coat. If you're ever sitting around waiting for filler to dry, a small cheap handheld hair dryer such as this can do wonders. It will reduce the dry time from an hour to 10 minutes. Now that the filler is dry, we can sand it off again. This time I'm being much more careful. I don't want to push too hard or sand as rough as I did before, as it is very easy to sand some of the filler out of the holes and cracks, leaving the surface no longer perfectly flush. Any sharp lines and edges such as this will be visible after you put the paint on. It may look or feel smooth to you now, but a small ridge will be obvious later. If you need to leave some filler on the surface, such as if a large area is chewed up, it has to be a very gradual fade out. In this scenario though, since we are dealing with specific individual holes, we can sand all the filler off until the surface is smooth. Filling should be done at the beginning, before the primer. If you miss something though and need to fill later, be sure to apply 2, not just 1 coats of lacquer on top, sanding with fine sandpaper in between. If you do just 1 coat, the area will have a different sheen to it. This is known as flashing. Another thing to keep in mind is that dried filler will dissolve in water, so make sure to do your filling after the cleaning stage, or you will have to redo it. And there you have it. The surface feels completely flush since I was so gentle and didn't push very hard. Wipe the dust off one more time and you'll be ready for paint.